Bonjour and hi to media colleagues here and everyone watching online. Welcome to this media briefing on the opening day of the fourth session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. My name is Keisha Rukikaire. I work with UNEP Communications and I'll be moderating this briefing. We should have started a bit earlier. My apologies for the delayed start, which means we will have to close by 2:15, unfortunately. We should dedicate about half this time to questions and answers. So on our panel today, we have Ambassador Luis Vayas Valdivieso, who is the chair of the INC. We have Ms. Andersen, who is the executive director of UNEP. We have the Honorable Steven Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change for Canada. And we have Ms. Jyoti Mathur-Filipp, Executive Secretary of the INC. So just before we get to our speakers, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping guidelines. We hope to use more than half this time for questions, as I said. The session is being live streamed on UN Web TV, and simultaneous French interpretation is available. If you require it, please pick a headset from Marcus and Travis, our trusty tech team in the back of the room. And for media with questions, if you do have a question, please raise your hand. I will call on you. Please state your name and the outlet you represent before you ask your question. And if you're not a member of the media, you are free to observe the press briefing, but please keep questions to the media. Our first speaker, I'll move on immediately, is Ambassador Luis Vayas, Chair of the INC. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and Excellency. And dear friends from the media, happy to be here to tell you that we've been working hard, not only at the beginning, because we have done it also at the beginning of the INC process. Also my gratitude to the Canadian government and people for hosting this crucial negotiation of INC 4, but also we've been working hard before Canada. Intersessional work, it was informal intersessional work. We've been working with all member states, with all regional groups, also with stakeholders, representatives from civil society, from private sector, from the academia, from the scientific community, from the indigenous representations, etc. So we have prepared the work for INC4, and we saw this morning that we could have a constructive meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Our next speaker is Ms. Andersen, Executive Director of UNEP.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. My thanks to members of the press for covering these negotiations. As I said yesterday, when plastic was first marketed in the 1950s, the concept of throwing away useful items was something that we had to be taught and learn. But fast forward 70 years and we have learned the lesson all too well. I live in Kenya and I can tell you that just this week, where we are seeing an incredible amount of rains, it is plastic blocking our drains, blocking our rivers, choking our oceans, and we've actually seen significant numbers of deaths because of flooding. So 2 years ago, the United Nations Environment Assembly greenlit these negotiations, and they're now underway to arrive at an internationally binding legal agreement or instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, that deals with the full life cycle of plastics. And when we say full life cycle, it means eliminating that which is unnecessary, and often that would be that which is short-lived and single-use, and rolling out in many jurisdictions refill, reuse models where national authorities consider that that's appropriate, and producing a lot less plastic as best we can so that we can limit that going into the environment. And that means that we also need to, if we're going to move into circularity, which we do want to, then we need to know what kind of chemicals are going into that, which will be circular in nature, because we're going to be using it for, obviously, food and other items. So moving on the reuse, as well as the recycle, as well as the reduce is critical. We've seen progress in the first 3 rounds of negotiations, and that has been critical. There's a text before the negotiators right now, and INC4, this very meeting under the very able chair, will be the place where we hope to see real forward movement on the draft that is before us, as well as the intercessional work. It's critical because we are set to meet for the last and final time at INC 5 in Busan, and the more progress we make here, the more likely we are that we will have an agreement that will meet everyone's concerns so that we can protect human and ecosystem health while ensuring that there is a just transition and space for the private sector to really step in and step up on innovation and to thrive in new markets. And that's why I have asked all the negotiators to show that commitment, to show that collaboration and ambition in the coming week so that we can advance the text and deliver on a deal that beats plastic pollution once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Andersen. And now, Honorable Guilbeault. Thank you.
Bonjour, greetings everyone. Aujourd'hui, je reconnais que les terres sur lesquelles nous sommes rassemblés font partie du territoire traditionnel non cédé de la nation Algonquin-Anishinaabe. Formal negotiations are just getting underway today here at INC4, but I already felt tremendous momentum building. For the past 2 days, the incredible turnout by ministers and delegations from around the world has inspired hope. And we're already making a lot of headway on landing an agreement on some common goals. In the past 48 hours, we've heard that plastic waste is the perfect byproduct of the 20th century consumer culture, cheap, disposable, and modern, or so we thought. It has created a thrown-away generation, and we agree that there has to be a better way. But we've also heard that plastic waste agreement is not about if, but about how. So we've already come to a consensus that we need to land this deal this year. And this is once in a generation opportunity to do it the right way. Alors, quels sont les critères nécessaires pour y parvenir? Nous devons être ambitieux et efficaces lors de ces négociations. Nous devons être ouverts et inclusifs, ce qui veut dire écouter attentivement les attentes des groupes historiquement marginalisés par la crise de la pollution plastique, de la société civile, des gouvernements locaux et régionaux, des peuples autochtones, ainsi que des jeunes. C'est pour cela que nous avons organisé la Journée des partenariats. Pour assurer le succès des négociations, nous devons d'abord reconnaître que nous ne pouvons pas choisir entre recycler, interdire ou innover. Nous devons faire les trois en même temps afin de considérer l'ensemble du cycle de vie des plastiques, de la conception jusqu'à la production et l'élimination. Nous devons veiller à ce que toutes nos décisions soient fondées sur les faits et la science et prioriser la santé humaine et celle des écosystèmes. We are here to build the foundation of final negotiated agreement at INC 5 in South Korea before year ends. It would mark one of the most significant environmental decisions since the Paris Agreement and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Canada is absolutely committed to building this agreement foundation stone by stone. The key pillars include eliminating or restricting problematic and avoidable plastic products and chemicals of concern, establishing clear targets, and developing design criteria or other targeted actions to enable reuse and recycling. We're also doing everything we can to raise the international profile of this plastic waste crisis so that it gets the global attention it deserves to drive the finish line in Korea. So we thank you, every member of the media who were here this week. Finally, let me say that Canada continues to try to do its part, both here and abroad. Today, I can announce that Canada is extending an additional $10 million to the Global Plastic Action Partnership, of which Canada is a founding member, funding that will help to continue the development of national plastic action partnership in developing countries. Canada annonce également une contribution de $5 millions à ProBlue, le programme mondial pour l'économie bleue. Ce financement aidera les pays en voie de développement à mettre en œuvre le cadre mondial de la biodiversité de Kunming-Montréal, un autre accord historique récemment conclu. Mettre fin à la pollution plastique, c'est aussi protéger nos écosystèmes. C'est accélérer la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Les annonces que nous faisons aujourd'hui confirment notre intention de répondre à la triple crise climatique, de la perte de biodiversité et de la pollution plastique. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Minister. And now rounding out remarks from the panel, we have Ms. Jyoti Mathur-Filipp, Executive Secretary of the INC.
Bonjour, hi to all of you. Today is the first day of the fourth session of the INC process. This morning, we have already heard the calls to action from the chair, from the UNEP Executive Director, and from the Honorable Minister Guilbeault for a strong outcome here in Ottawa. So what does a strong outcome from INC look like? It means that by the end of this week, we will have a significantly advanced text of the international legally binding instrument, getting it as close as possible to the final agreement that we all want to see at INC 5 in Busan, Republic of Korea. It means leaving Ottawa with a strong mandate on intersessional work that will allow the committee to finalize the instrument in Busan this November, December. The revised draft text is now firmly in the hands of members and represents all their views. Delegations know the hard issues that need to be addressed at this session and that flexibility will be needed to reach consensus. This is the only way forward. We hope to move swiftly into the substance of the negotiations that should advance and streamline the text. This is our largest and most inclusive meeting yet, something we continue to prioritize at each INC session. We have over 1,300 registered participants from 175 members, over 2,800 participants from 742 non-governmental organizations, 16 intergovernmental organizations, and 22 UN entities for INC4. We have brought the world together once more here in Ottawa to beat plastic pollution, and we need to make these 7 days count. Merci, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will now move on to the Q&A portion of the briefing. Please raise your hand if you have a question. I have somebody over there. Thank you. Gabby, right there. Thank you. Please state your name and outlet. Thank you.
Hi, Jordan Woolman with Politico. Thank you very much for doing this. I wanted to ask, perhaps for the minister or the executive director of UNEP, do you empathize with countries that are growing increasingly frustrated by the like-minded group's assertion that the agreement should really only be dealing with downstream waste management of plastics and not globally binding production cuts that Canada has called for through the High Ambition Coalition? Thank you.
Look, do I empathize with countries that are drowning in plastic? Absolutely. Do I understand what a small island developing country is facing, plastic arriving on its shores on which they're probably accountable for tourism income that are impacted by when they have to clean this up? Of course I do. Do I also understand what an oil-dependent economy is living on and off? Of course I do. And do I therefore understand that the complexity of these negotiations deal with different interests? Absolutely. The issue is that these negotiations are seeking to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, which impacts all of us, including some of those countries that are responsible for producing it. And so I certainly understand that there can be some, what was the word you used? I forget, you used the word irritation or that they, frustration. Of course I do, but I think we also need to understand that it has to be about a broad global agreement where we get that that just transition is one that has to take account of everyone and everyone's economies. And in that respect, it is very interesting to observe, of course, that there's a plastic sector in every country. There are jobs associated with the plastic sector in every country. And so as we move into refill, reuse, and recycle, there are also equal job opportunities associated in every country. And that is what is so interesting. Analysis made both by ourselves as well as our friends at UNIDO and ILO shows precisely that the job opportunities from that new plastics economy, if you like to call it that, a recycling and reduction economy with different opportunities is significant, and that is part of what we need to capture. Thank you.
I would echo what Inger said. And obviously, Canada is a large oil and gas producer, and we recognize our responsibility to doing our share in ensuring that we have a successful outcome, which is why we put our hand up to organize this meeting here. What I can also tell you is that we had 2 days of ministerial meetings before today. We had representation from pretty much all corners of the world, and since the end of INC 3, we've seen progress. We've seen the country position evolve on a number of issues. And today is the first day that countries actually get to talk about the text that was tabled at the end of INC 3. So I think I'm very hopeful, and I think obviously the negotiations here are very important, as Jyoti said, to set the stage so that when we get to South Korea, we've given the South Koreans all of the chances that they need to ensure that we can land this deal, but I'm confident that we can get there.
Thank you. We have somebody down there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah J., and I'm here representing Fashion Revolution Canada. Inger, in your opening remarks, you acknowledged that we'll continue to need plastics for specific uses, electrical, transport, construction, etc. I wonder if the instrument will contain provisions or considerations of the apparel and textile sector, which is using an exorbitant and increasing amount of fossil fuel-derived textiles.
Of course, it's too soon to say what would be in the text, but we do have 75 pages of text. And I guess that it'll be hard to find a person that lives in a modern society, an urban society, that might not necessarily in their closet have textile that has polyester or other materials within it. I think there that the concern that we have around that is, of course, that we understand that many of these micro and nanofibers go into the oceans, are uptaken by plankton. Plankton takes fish, the fish uptake the plankton, and so up the food chain it goes right into our lovely fish meal. And so the issue is, of course, how can we deal with this with an innovation, technical clothing that has provided warmth and opportunity and jobs for many sectors, whilst at the same time ensure that we do not have that enormous washout into our oceans. And that's a broader conversation with the textile industry, with the innovators in that industry, as well as with the washing machine industry, I hasten to add, and enhanced filters, etc., which I think is very much happening as we speak, and which I find very exciting. And so the degree with specificity with which we'll see that in the treaty remains to be seen. I'm not sure we'll go into that level of detail, but I think that it's very clear that we want to end is plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, and that will have to take into account precisely what you mentioned. Thank you.
Ezra Levant for Rebel News, and I'd like to thank the UN for accrediting a citizen journalist outlet like us. Mr. Guilbeault, according to the Globe and Mail, you serve on the China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development, which is a government agency controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Is that a conflict of interest with your role as a Canadian cabinet minister? And is it perhaps why you have really been gentle on China, even though it is by far the world's largest polluter, including with plastics pollution? Thanks again for letting me ask that question.
The Canada-China Council is an organization that has been in existence since, from memory, 1971 or 1972, and a succession of environment ministers from all colors and stripes, including under Stephen Harper. A number of environment ministers sat on this organization. It is a partnership where we exchange information on environmental issues, and we work together to develop public policies that are implemented in China to tackle a number of the things that we're talking about here.
Thank you. We have one more question over here. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Alexa Lavoie for Ribbon News. And my question is regarding, Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta. She has expressed to fight against what she called absurd plastic bans. I want to have your thought about that.
I respectfully disagree with the Premier of Alberta on the plastic ban that Canada has put in place. But we don't think that we won't ban our way out of plastic pollution. But we do, and there is a large consensus here, and if you talk to delegates and experts from all around the world, there is an agreement that we should ban those plastics that are either non-recyclable or almost impossible to recycle, that have large impacts on the environment. and on human health. But as Inger and others have said, and I've said myself, we will continue using plastic. We need to make sure that we ban those that we don't need, and that we continue using those that are essential in certain sectors like the medical sector, appliances, aeronautics, and we keep those plastics in the economy and out of the environment and out of our body.
Many thanks. We have Jordan again.
Thanks so much. This might be for the chair, but really anyone can chime in here. Would you consider at some point, whether it be at INC 4 or INC 5, adjusting the procedures to do away with a consensus vote and some other form of a majority rule, 2/3 rule, if, just thinking ahead here, if, it becomes challenging to get all member states on board with an eventual potential agreement? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. As you know, well, we have a provisional rules of procedure. We haven't adopted the rules of procedure. We are applying in provisional basis, and we have that agreement from INC 1 in Punta del Este. It's up to member states. Members, they should decide how to go ahead with the rules of procedure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that we are completely out of time. A couple of our panelists have to dash for meetings. If I was going to give one question, it would be for the lady behind there who hasn't asked a question yet. But that will be the last one, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Camila Aguilera, de Escritura Crónica in Argentina. I'm going to make the question in English, so don't worry. In order to have meaningful participation, what will UNEP do to make sure that impacted people have ways to directly share remarks during the negotiation process? Mr. Luis Vayas, please. This is addressed to you.
I didn't get the last part. Can you repeat, please?
The question?
Yes.
What will UNEP do to make sure that impacted people have ways to directly share remarks or observations during the negotiation process?
Maybe I'll just start, and if the chair wishes, I know that it's the chair's distinct desire to keep space and to hold the space so that registered observers can indeed speak. And I know that the secretary and the chair are working on it, trying to make sure precisely that that can happen. I'm also aware that there was a degree of frustration in INC 3 because there was so many other things, and therefore the ability to speak was not as broad as I know the previous chair would have wished. So I think that I've heard the chair have exactly this conversation and would do everything in his power to ensure that voices are heard within the context of this meeting. We in UNEP, we are born out of an activist movement. We have, our roots are in environmental activism in the 60s and the 70s, and we are proud of the conventions that we host, 17 in all. This would be the number 18, where we do everything we can to ensure plurality of votes, diversity of views, and voices protected. Thank you.
If I can add, as a host country, we wanted to make this INC meeting as inclusive as possible, which is why we had those 2 days of partnerships days. We have a public action zone just across the street. As part of the Canadian delegation, we have Indigenous voices, youth, and when we proposed to make this meeting very open, very transparent, all we got from INC Secretariat and the UNEP was support and encouragement to make it happen. We will be working with the South Koreans to see if they want to reproduce what we've been, and maybe even enhance what we did here. But it was a tremendous partnership to be able to do this, and as Canada is committed to continue helping and ensuring in any way we can that we play our part to ensuring that it happens.
Thank you. And from my side as a chair, I can also guarantee you the participation of observers and active participation. And not only that, but I have asked and I have requests also from representatives of civil society, private sector, stakeholders, academia, scientific community, active participation and contributions. We need them. This is a particular process too, where observers has a particular place, and I'm proud to say that we have seen that and growing also the participation of observers during the INCs. So that's also quite important for the process. Thank you.
Just to add one point, on Sunday, the chair, myself, the minister, and the executive secretary held an open dialogue with observers precisely to begin to air some of these views. It was about an hour and a half, I'm not exactly sure, and it was very helpful. And of course, but that was outside the proceedings, but also adds a significant amount of voice and value to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that warm and fuzzy multilateral note, we will close this. Thank you very much, members of the media. We have a press conference at 3 o'clock. Greenpeace will be having a press conference, so please pop in. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.